All right. Turn to John chapter 8. John chapter 8. You know how I lose track of this stuff. What was that? Yesterday's reading, I think we went from John chapter 2 to John chapter 8 this week. So this should be fresh. John chapter 8, verses 31 through 47. That's where we're going to kind of hone in on these verses, this section, what Jesus is hammering home with the question, who is your Father? That's important, and it's not important, as you'll see, it's not as important who your biological father is as it is who your spiritual father is, who you most closely resemble characteristically, and your behavior, your attitude, your mindset, the truth that you are aware of and believe. There's just one truth. Of course, there are a lot of different people who have their version of the truth, their spin on the truth, but that does not make it so that there would be actual other truths. There's just the one, and Jesus is kind of hammering that home in this passage as well. So the opening discussion says, how do good fathers teach their children? What would you say? How do good fathers teach their children? By example. Okay, so let them see you do what they ought to also do. Okay, I think that's good. What else? Would you say with patience? Would that be good? Maybe a little grace even. Hey, they're not going to get it the first time, maybe. Or maybe it'll just be a little flawed the first time around. They're trying, though. Trying real hard. You can tell that they're sincere and they're really trying to get it. Okay, what else? Any other thoughts on how do good fathers teach their children? That's the second question. What kind of things do they teach them? Yeah, no, that's fine. We'll go ahead and move on from the how to the what. Okay, what kinds of things do good fathers teach their children? And what did you say, Mom? Okay, teach them about consequences. So kind of teach them that there is a reality that they're going to have to interact with in life. Discipline? Oh, he did? Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Good answer, Dad. Good answer. Let's see if it's on the board, though. Oh. Survey says, we surveyed 100 so-called Christians. The top answers are on the board. That sounds kind of fun for a Sunday night, actually. All right. What other kinds of things do good fathers teach their children? Reality, consequences, accountability, we could say, discipline. Okay, being slow to anger, teach them that patience. Is there a difference? No. Yeah. Well, a good father would teach them about the Bible, right? Yeah. Are they, though? I just must say. Yeah, no. I think it all kind of overlaps to some degree. You can give me an answer, and if in your mind the guy's not a Christian, that's fine. If he is, that's even better. But Bible, that would be a good thing. Teach them the Bible. What other kinds of things? Any of you fathers, what did you teach your children? What did you try to teach you? Huh? I don't think so. So don't teach them to lie. Teach them to tell the truth instead. Yeah. Is that it? Kindness, respect. Carol's on a roll. 2 in a row. Yeah, teach them the fruit of the Spirit. Teach them to manifest that fruit of the Spirit, for sure. That was kind of my thought. Moving on. Yeah. No, so take note of that. Take note that good fathers teach with a little patience, a little grace, by example, leading rather than, kind of pushing or pulling, leading children in the right direction. And the things they teach them the things you told me don't sound like things that can really be argued with. The things you were telling me were not like, well, I think every kid needs to learn how to play hockey. There was none of that. It was all honesty and respect and patience and accountability and reality. So like you're kind of dealing with truth, it sounds like, right? I mean, things that kids like, well, back to Matthew's, comment about Galatians 5 there, against such things there is no law, right? These are things that are just right. These things are truth. And so fathers should teach their children the truth. And we see that from our Heavenly Father as well, certainly. So look at John chapter 8. We're going to start in verse 31. And like we've been doing over the last several weeks, we'll hit a section, we'll ask a few questions, and we'll move on and keep going until we get to verse 47. So John chapter 8, starting verse 31, it says, "So Jesus was saying to those Jews who had believed him, 'If you continue in my word, then you are truly disciples of mine, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free.'" So notice who we're dealing with. We're dealing with Jews who had a level of belief in him. Now, we've heard probably a lot of different thoughts on who these people were and what their level of belief was. Was it that they had just started following him, and so we're just dealing with kind of a new belief, and that's just as cut and dried as that? Or is it, hey, they were like, yeah, the Messiah is here, because they were all amped up for the Messiah, and the problem might be that they find out as they get to know him better that he's not the Messiah they thought he was. I don't know. I've heard different angles. I tend to think, because of what we know so far, that it's kind of more on the first side of things, that, hey, they heard him. I believe they heard what he was teaching. I think that's why they had come to believe in him. They heard what he was laying down, and none of it was this militaristic, political leader type speech. They heard what he was saying, and they started following him. I think these are just people who are believing what he's saying, kind of getting on the bandwagon, so to speak. And Jesus is telling them, if you continue in my word, then you will be true disciples of mine, and you'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Now, let's get to the questions. Number one says, who is really a disciple of Jesus? Based on the text, what do we learn? Say that out loud. Say that louder for your deaf son to hear. Yeah, those who continue in my word, he says, right? It's a conditional statement, right? He says, if you continue in my word, then you are truly disciples of mine. So if you don't do that, are you? No, of course not. Jesus is setting up a conditional statement, and so we know that the conditions say, if it's this way, then this is true. If it's not that way, then this isn't true. So you are really a disciple of Jesus if you continue or abide, some of your translations might say, in his word. Is that what yours says, Mom, abide? Is that the 1977 you got back there? Gotcha. I didn't realize the 95 updated that particular passage, but I guess it did. All right. Number two, when will you know the truth? Based on this text, when will you really know the truth? Jesus said, if you continue in my word, then you are truly disciples of mine, and you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. Yeah, so if you believe his word, abide in it, continue in it, you're living it out, and you become a true disciple, you are living as a true disciple of his, you're going to know the truth, okay? Now let's think through this a little bit. What is this telling us? Because it's fine and good to say, yeah, that's what the words say, we can mix up the order and turn it into a formula, and that's fine and good, but let's be practical about this. Think of like anything that you continue in. You can read an owner's manual to anything, and just having read it is one thing. But then starting to work on those things, like let's make it really boring. Let's say we're talking about toasters. You're studying on this toaster because you need to fix it. Well, then somebody starts coming to you and saying, hey, my toaster's broken, I need you to fix mine. And then somebody else needs you to fix theirs. And then by the time, after a little while, you start a little small appliance shop, and you're like continuing in this stuff, and you're fixing it day in and day out, opening them up, putting them back together, figuring out how it works, right? You know the truth about toasters. You really learn it. Through practice, you come to this experiential knowledge, right? You learn it by black and white. It's on the page in your Bibles. But when you continue, or the abide word is good because that's what's here. Dwell in the Word. You live in the Word. You live by the Word. You know the Word like you wouldn't know just by, say where these Jews are at the time. Hey, I believe in Jesus. And then you just start showing up and sitting in a pew for an hour every week. That's not abiding in the Word. You're not going to really know the truth or really be set free from anything. Okay? But when you abide, when you follow the Word, when you live by the Word, you know the Word. You know the truth about things. You have this experiential knowledge that is totally different and something we have to have really to know the truth the way we need to. Number 3, from what do we, excuse me, there it is. From what do we need to be set free? I'm trying to fight it, guys. From what do we need to be set free? Sin? Slavery to sin would certainly be in there. That's in the context, right? We're going to get there here in a little bit. We'll read about it in just a second. What else is kind of in the context? What could we also be set free from? He says you'll know the truth, and the truth will make you free. So what could it also be setting us free from? Having the truth sets us free from, being bound to lies, believing lies, the consequences of believing lies. You guys know the dramatic scene when someone's like, I've been believing a lie all of my life. Whatever the situation is, suddenly, whether it's a best friend that, you didn't know they had it in them to stab you in the back like that, and they feel like they've been living a lie, it's shocking like that, and there's consequences. You feel like you've wasted your life, you wasted time. Well, the fact is, when you believe lies, there are many times where those consequences have messed up your life. Because you were living based on lies instead of living by the truth, abiding in the truth, that sort of thing, okay? So we're set free. We know we're set free from sin, from slavery to sin. We're set free from lies. We're set free from the fear of death. The Bible makes that pretty clear. We know that is going to be the final call. If you hadn't obeyed the gospel and been living for Christ and abiding in the truth by then, time's up. And so we fear death unless we're living by the truth, and we know that we're right with God. Then we don't have to fear death. So it sets us free from that. Really, the truth makes it so that we're no longer enslaved to anything except if we want to say to Christ. And that's a bond slave relationship. We sign up for that. We take the awl and we, nail our ear to the doorpost, right? Okay. I think all of you have been in the Tuesday night class, and I'm not totally throwing you off. Okay. Let's move on to verse 33 here. It says, they answered him, we are Abraham's descendants and have never yet been enslaved to anyone. How is it that you say you will become free? So see, you guys did a great job. When I said, what do you be set free from? You guys had answers prepared. They're like, hold on just a second. We've never been enslaved to anything. See, they've got a problem with this. And they're like, why are you saying you'll be set free? So number 4, let's just be real practical here. Were the Jews ever slaves? Yes. Tell me about it. Yeah, well, that's true too. But their history included Assyrian captivity, Babylonian captivity, famously enslaved to the Egyptians. I was going to say Egypt, and then I said Egyptians. You know those Egyptians. They're not the Egyptians or the Egyptians, they're the Egyptians. Yeah. Today it'd be the Egyptians. Everything's I this and I that. Anyway, absolutely they had been slaves. But number 5 says, what were the Jews slaves to and didn't realize? Sin. Yeah, absolutely. Sin. What kind of sins were they guilty of? What was really their problem? What'd you say? All of the above? Tell me what A, B, and C are. Halloween traditions? Oh. It's like I hadn't heard that one before. This allergy thing going on has got my ears worse than usual. Okay. Not following traditions of man. What did you? No, I've already been to you. What'd you say? You said something. Idolatry. Yeah, and that wasn't even their sin. Like that was other nations, but they did it. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like they had those ideas. That's what really is frustrating about the idolatry, because they didn't know to do that stuff, but they got sucked into it by watching other nations and wanting to do what they were doing. And so, yeah, frustrating, but absolutely guilty of idolatry. They had that in their history for sure. What else? What they have going on in Jesus' day that was just a major stumbling block for them? The law and their use of it for their own purposes, right? So now we're getting to kind of what I'm thinking of, pride, selfishness, a desire for power, that sort of thing. And then most immediately, rejecting Christ. Yeah, unbelief. Yeah, rejecting God's Messiah. All right. Let's move along here. Verse 34 through 37. It says, Jesus answered them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who commits sin is the slave of sin. The slave does not remain in the house forever. The Son does remain forever. So if the Son makes you free, you will be free indeed. I know that you are Abraham's descendants, yet you seek to kill me because my word has no place in you." What is... That should say who. I'm like, what does that say? What is a slave to sin? Who is a slave to sin? Yeah, everyone. It says everyone who commits sin. The tense that's written in is talking about someone who practices sin. You know, it's an ongoing action for them. Now, that's not to try to give people a pass because I committed a sin. Still guilty. Still committed that sin. Absolutely. But it is talking about someone who commits sin. That's a practice of theirs. And so that makes it pretty easy, or it makes it easier to see how that person will become a slave to that sin. Because anything we practice, we really run a risk of becoming enslaved to it. You think about the device world today, or any of the comforts that, we live in the greatest time in history, they say. All this technology, all these things to make our life easier, and we become enslaved to a lot of it because we use it. We put it to use a lot. We practice with it a lot, and so we become enslaved to it. Well, sin does that times 1,000, because number one, it comes with serious consequences, not just in the spiritual sense, the consequences that come through our sin, spiritual death, and being guilty of our sin, but also think of all the various sins and what they can do to your life. Think of how you can be set free by God from the guilt and the burden of those sins, but there's some that you're going to carry all throughout the rest of your life. Like, you're going to carry the consequences of those sins. We can see very quickly how you become enslaved to sin when that's what you're practicing, when that's what you've committed yourself to. Number 7 says, what is the difference between a slave and a son? And first of all, according to the scripture here, what does it say? What's the difference between a slave and a son? The slave doesn't remain in the house forever. It's important to have that word remain there. He doesn't remain in the house forever. The son does remain forever. And here's what that remain word is saying. So the slave could be in the house for a long time, but they're not one who their situation is not set up that they would remain forever. They could be kicked out, sent on their way, sold at any given time. They're not an heir. They are not entitled to really much of anything. On the other hand, the son is heir. The Son is heir to all things. The Son is heir to the Father's belongings, his possessions, and so on and so forth, okay? And so the Son, when we quit using just a general father, a general son, a general household, a general slave, and we start thinking about God the Father, and we start thinking about a slave versus the Son, and we start thinking about where it says the Son, if he sets you free, you'll be free indeed. Here's what it means to be free indeed. To be free is one thing. To be free indeed is talking about not just being set free from slavery to sin, not just being set free in general, but being set free and adopted into the household. You'll be free. You'll be free indeed. The Son is the heir to all things, and he's able, if he sets you free, he can bring, and does, we know Jesus, the Son, when we're talking about making this specific, the application to us, he sets us free, and we're adopted into the family, and we become a co-heir. We become fellow heirs along with him. Number 8, why did they want to kill Jesus? What does it say? Verse 37, I know that you are Abraham's descendants, yet you seek to kill me because... my word has no place in you, he says. Was Jesus sharing the truth with them? Isn't that interesting? They had no place in them for the truth. They had no place in their lives. We were talking a minute ago about abiding in his word, knowing the truth and the truth that set us free. These people have no place in their lives for what he was sharing with them. No place in their lives for what the Son of God was sharing with them, that he got from God the Father, right? That these are God's own words that he's sharing with them, the truth, and they don't want to hear it. Okay? They're definitely not abiding in it. They're not following in it. They're not living by it. There are Jews here who wanted to kill Jesus because there was no place in their lives for the truth that he was sharing with them. Look at verse 38 through 40 now. He said, I speak the things which I have seen with my Father, therefore you also do the things which you heard from your father. They answered and said to him, Abraham is our father. Jesus said to them, if you are Abraham's children, do the deeds of Abraham. But as it is, you are seeking to kill me, a man who has told you the truth which I heard from God. This Abraham did not do. Okay, so you see that? He's speaking things, like I said, that are from the Father, and he says, you do things that are from your father. They get kind of bristled up a little bit. They say, well, we have Abraham as our father. That was their call to their lineage, and saying, hey, we were born to the right parents, the right race, the right ethnicity. We come from Abraham. And he's like, no, that's not what we're so concerned about here. If you're Abraham's children, do what Abraham would do. Do the deeds of Abraham. That's what he's more concerned about. Not that you were born from a lineage that can be traced back to Abraham in some way, some form or fashion, but that you would do the deeds of Abraham, right? It's Abraham's faith that God was pleased with, not the fruit of his loins. That's not what Jesus is concerned about for sure here. He says, but as it is, you're seeking to kill me, a man who's told you the truth. You want to get rid of someone. You want to erase their life from the face of the earth because they're sharing the truth with you, which I got from God, he says. He's like, this Abraham did not do. This isn't in line with him. So number 9 says these Jews were physically Abraham's children, but why weren't they his spiritual children? They weren't doing what Abraham had done, would do, right? They weren't living a life consistent with Abraham's faith. The thing that the Bible, if the Bible ever brings up Abraham and says, hey, be like Abraham, it's always talking about his faith, right? His faith, and that faith that was acted out in deed, right? Number 10, what were they doing that Abraham did not and would not have done? Yeah, seeking to kill Jesus for sharing the truth with them. Seeking to kill Jesus for sharing the truth with them. Abraham, Abraham had not even seen resurrection yet, but he took God at his word and lived out that faith in every word of God. God said, go and kill your one and only promised son. And we all know Isaac was as good as dead in the mind of Abraham for 3 days. And then he was given back to him, just like the prodigal son story of he was dead and then alive. But in this case, we're talking in his mind, he was physically dead. But then instead he was brought back, resurrected, even though he didn't actually have to end up killing him. But Abraham, you see how he received the truth? He heard what God said and go and offer up your son Isaac, and he just did it. Right? I mean, I'm not going to say that in reality, the way it all went down, he didn't think about it for a while. We don't hear those details in the Bible, but, I'm sure he wrestled with it a little bit, and that's fine. But he followed through and went to do exactly what God told him to do. He didn't say, no, God, I'm going to wrestle with you instead because I'm not going to do what you told me to do. He didn't do that. That's what the Jews were doing. They said, oh, well, if this is what the Messiah is saying, let's just kill him. We don't want the truth. They're seeking to kill him because he's sharing the truth with them. That was not in line with Abraham. That was not what Abraham would do. All right, verse 41. John 8, verse 41 through 42. It says, you are doing the deeds of your father. They said to him, we were not born of fornication. We have one Father, God. Jesus said to them, if God were your father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and have come from God. For I have not even come on my own initiative, but he sent me. So number 11, very simple. Who sent Jesus? God, because it says he came from God. That's where he was sent from. And number 12, if God is your father, what is your relationship with Jesus? You'd be a brother. And in line with what's said here in the text, you would love him, right? Because he says, if you were from God, you'd love me, right? You wouldn't be trying to kill me. He says, if God, in verse 42, he says, if God were your father, you would love me, for I proceeded forth and have come from God. He's like, if God was your father, you'd love me. And so that's the relationship that I'm most concerned with. The Bible does talk about Jesus as the elder brother, paints him in that way, and shows us as co-heirs, and we're adopted in the family, and we would absolutely see him in a sense as a brother of a certain kind. But the relationship I want to highlight here is that it would be a relationship where we love him. If God is your father, you would love Jesus. That's just the way it works. And so that was what the Jews were really getting hung up on. They didn't. They claimed to have God as their father, but they didn't love Jesus. Not at all. In fact, they hated him and wanted to kill him. Verses 43 through 44, he says, why do you not understand what I am saying? It is because you cannot hear my word. You are of your father the devil, and you want to do the desires of your father. He was a murderer from the beginning and does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. Whenever he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own nature, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Jesus is sort of getting to the point here, isn't he? Number 13, who did Jesus say was the father of these Jews? The devil. And why was it said that he was their father? Yeah, it says you want to do the desires of your father. Jesus tells them you want to do the desires of your father. And he's so what Jesus is doing, it's just logic. Jesus isn't being dramatic. He's saying, here's the deal. What I see from you matches up with the devil. The desires that you have are the desires of the devil. To see me killed, to see truth rejected, and lies to be spread. Like what you are doing is the will of Satan. If there is someone who you identify with most as a father, the one who, we talked earlier in our opening discussion about what do fathers teach their children, the things that they think are right? The things that they believe this child needs to know. They teach them by leading them, right? They teach them by example. They show them. So what are you showing when you show by example? You don't go and show them things that you never did, but you want them to do. You go and show them the things you did that you want them to also do. Well, the devil, he has things that he wants to do. He has desires. And so when there are people out here doing things that are the devil's desires, they're like his children. It's like he's taught them. It's like they're following after his example, like he's teaching them by example. That's what it looks like. And so Jesus is using logic. He says, your desires line up with the devil's desires. God's not your father. You'd love me. Abraham isn't your father because you're not doing anything that looks like something Abraham would do. I don't see faith here. I don't see the love and the trust and the desire to know and obey the truth that was in Abraham. None of that's going on. But I do see what you're doing lining up exactly with what the devil desires. Number 14, what are the characteristics of the devil which the crowd was emulating? So what is it that Jesus saw and said, that sounds like the devil to me? What's he mention here? Murder. One more. Lying. Yeah, he's a murderer and a liar. And what were these Jews who rejected Jesus? Well, we saw multiple places here so far that they wanted to kill him. Jesus has mentioned it multiple times. In fact, we talked about this morning a few chapters before this, right? And we know it was going on even before that. But in John chapter 5, we read that in verse 18, I think it said they were seeking all the more to kill him because he wasn't just doing these things on the Sabbath, but he was claiming God as his father, that he was the Son of God. They wanted to kill him. They had murderous desires. The devil is a murderer, has been from the beginning. And then they were liars. We know they sought to spread lies, and they sought to share things that were not true to try to keep others from following Jesus, try to keep other people from getting on board and bringing others to follow him. They didn't want Jesus to have a following, so they spread lies. And they didn't want him to be seen as the Son of God. And so that took lying to get that across. And honestly, anytime you reject the truth, you're participating in lying. That covering up the truth, you're participating in lying. You don't have to say a whole bunch of things that are just, not true, just flat out not true, to be a liar. You can cover up the truth so that people can't find it. What are you doing? You're accomplishing the same thing as directly stating a lie to someone. If I try to make sure that you can't tell that this particular thing over here is true, if I'm trying to cover that up so that you will instead believe something else, it's just like I told you, believe this other thing, right? The Jews were very guilty of that, for sure. And then number 15 is a thought question. We don't necessarily want to talk about this out loud in a big group like this, but do these fit you? Who is your spiritual father? Now, I don't know that anybody in here has murderous thoughts or that you're necessarily some awful liar or anything, but let's think about who would, let's be real honest. If Jesus kind of had me backed into a corner a little bit and was asking me about my father and the deeds that I do, who do I look like? Who do I look most like? Whose deeds am I doing most of? I can't remember the message, but we phrased it this way kind of in a sermon probably a couple months back, to sort of think about how much of our time are we spending directly on things that God wants us to do, that God has commanded us to do. Because sometimes we're comfortable just being like, hey, I didn't sin, I didn't do the bad thing today. I stayed out of trouble. But it's like, how often are we accomplishing God's desires? And how much time, how many dollars, how much effort, how much of our talent are we actually using on things that the devil would be like, hey, works for me. You know, how much time are we dedicating specifically to things God wants to see done? And how much time are we either specifically dedicating, or just because we're not focused, we end up sort of serving the devil just kind of passively? Because he's like, hey, I'm happy that you're not out there doing this. I'm happy that you're not doing that. I mean, what percentage of your waking hours are spent directly on things that God would be pleased, things that are carrying out God's desires, and what percentage would be the devil's like, okay, good. They're just kicked back, relaxed. They're not out, talking to anybody. They're not serving anybody. Literally zero influence is coming from them and being put into the world. Perfect. Sounds good. So think about that in terms of who's your father. Well, what do you do on a daily basis? Who do you look most like when it comes to whose desires you're carrying out, okay? Consider that. And then the last section here, verses 45 through 47, he says, but because I speak the truth, you do not believe me. Which one of you convicts me of sin? If I speak truth, why do you not believe me? He who is of God hears the words of God. For this reason, you do not hear them, because you are not of God. Number 16, why did the crowd not believe Jesus? What did he say? He said, because of this, you do not believe me. What's he say? Because he spoke the truth. See, that's the thing, and I know we've already said it, but I'm going to say it one more time because it's mentioned here. That's the thing that's really deeply concerning here for these people, is that their beef with Jesus is the truth. The truth exposes. The truth makes things clear to everyone. The truth levels the playing field. It does a lot of things that people who are kind of doing anything a little shady or trying to get any kind of upper hand, it exposes those people and takes away power, takes away things that they're trying to hold on to and to get. And so it kind of shows, they're kind of showing their cards as to why they have a problem with the truth. Well, because the truth apparently doesn't serve you. The truth apparently isn't going to give you what you're trying to get. Otherwise, why would you have a problem with the truth? It's the truth. Well, if the truth is going to mess up your, flip your card upside down, or, turn your world upside down, or, kind of take something away from you that you hold dear, and you decide that that's worth more than the truth to you, well, now we see a major flaw. We see a real problem, and that's the issue. And remember, these are people who sought even to kill Jesus. They were so bent against the truth that he was sharing, they sought to kill him. That's how much they chose their own desires over the truth. Number 17? Yeah, number 17. Could they convict him of sin when they tried? He says, which one of you convicts me of sin? Could they? No. That kind of follow-up question says, did the court of law find any fault in him? Did anybody flip there to John 19:6? What's that say? Yeah. He says, you guys crucify him if you want, but he's like, I'm not going to have any part of this because I find no fault in the man. And Pilate wasn't happy with him. He's kind of upset that he wouldn't speak, he wouldn't perform, he wouldn't tell him what he wanted to hear. But he's like, the guy hasn't done anything worthy of death. So even the court of law, which is not the most important thing here, the fact that he's sharing truth and that it's from God, the message is from God, that's the most important thing. But even the court of law did not find Jesus guilty of anything. All right, number 18, why do some people not hear or listen to what Jesus says? Mm-hmm. Yeah, they don't want to hear or be confronted by the truth because there are preferences, there are desires, there are power plays, there are angles, there are all these things that are going on in their lives, and so they can't even tolerate it, because if they tolerate it, it just makes their life miserable. And so instead they have to reject it, try to squash it, try to squash everyone who believes it and wants to share it. They can't tolerate it. They have to reject it because the truth doesn't change. But the truth can change their life, right? The truth itself, those facts, don't change. And so the problem is, what do people do a lot of times in a given situation? Well, they try to make it work to their advantage. And so we see people, like we're even nervous about like our kids or our friends or people we know that we want to see them do right. We're nervous when they get put in a situation where we're like, ooh, they should be tempted to lie. I hope they don't lie. I hope they tell the truth. Because why do we think that? We think, well, they might lie because if they tell the truth, it's going to hurt. Right? If they tell the truth in this situation, they're going to face some painful consequences. They're going to have to, spill some beans that kind of are the backstory to that. If they open up and say that, yeah, this is the truth, oh, well, how'd that come about? Well, now they're going to have to share all this other stuff. Like, we know that, man, they're going to be tempted in this situation to lie. And because we love them and we want them to do the right thing, we don't want them to lie, but we're worried they might, because that's what people do. When they get in situations that they want to turn the situation to their advantage. The truth doesn't change. And so whatever situation you're in, you have to navigate it with the truth. As Christians, that's what we do. We navigate the world, we navigate situations, scenarios we find ourselves in based on living by the truth. And people who want to continue getting everything they want out of life, like they want to get things for themselves. They want more money, more power, prestige, reputation, relationships, things like that. When that's what their world is about, the truth doesn't serve them very well. The truth doesn't help them to gain those things. They have to let that guard down and say, you know what? I'm going to take what I'm given. What the Lord offers me, what the Lord gives me in whatever situation I find myself in, I'll just take whatever He provides. You have to get to that point, otherwise you're going to keep manipulating situations, and you're going to do what the Jews did. You're going to reject truth. Because if you tolerate it, like I said, it's just going to make life miserable. If you try to just sort of like, I'll kind of, I like to drop in on church, and I like to, quote Bible verses with my friends and stuff, but you don't live by it. You're going to realize that's a problem. Someone might even call you on it and say, hey, I don't think that's a real Christian thing to be doing. And then you're going to have that guilt weighing on you. So you don't tolerate it. You reject it. You try to get it out of your life. That's the reason that people don't want to hear or listen to what Jesus says. They don't want to hear or listen to the truth because of what it's going to do to their situation. They're going to have to reject it altogether, or they're going to have to let it change their life completely. All right? Matthew, did you have something there? I thought I saw an ink pen coming up.
I always got to say what
Me too. It's usually just the same thing over and over, though. Let's be honest.
My overall objective there last night was a subject discussion, a conversation on the truth. And so then I was thinking of John 17, right? Sanctify them in thy words.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And so they're rejecting the opportunity to be sanctified. So much power in the truth. I want to make sure we don't walk away from this, thinking or feeling like, Jake painted this picture of, the truth really binds us. It just puts us in this tough spot. It's not that either. We started with the truth sets us free. Right? It takes away all these variables. It takes away anxiety, trying to like worry, what am I going to do in this situation? And what if they say this? Or what if this happens? Or what if they marry that person? Or what? Like, you know what? I am going to live by the truth. And the truth is going to, it's just going to, the cookie's going to crumble however it crumbles, and I'm going to do the right thing.
Hey, really what I wanted to ask you about, and probably getting way out of class here, you said something there when we put the page, 1 and 2, there about rest. Who remembers that? Who was rest?
Like Hulk Hogan, or
No, like
what kind of?
a character that in the Bible, rest on sin, or rest on something. I'll look up.
The only thing I can think of is that I did mention that Abraham, may have wrestled a little with the idea of obeying God, but certainly rightly did it, went ahead and was willing to offer up Isaac. I don't suppose that's probably what you're talking about, though. Abby?
Right, that's what
You were going there. That's not what I said, but that's where he was going, I think.
that's where I was going.
Yeah.
Right. Whatever you said there, that's right.
Yeah, I may have been talking a little about this whole kind of wrestling with whether to believe the truth or reject it. Might have been talking about something like that.
So, yeah, that was my conclusion.
Uh-huh. Yeah, and here's how I would conclude that. Let's all just vow now not to wrestle with the truth in the sense of, do I obey it? Do I not obey it? Let's only wrestle with understanding what God is telling us to do. And then when we understand it, let's do it, come what may. If it makes life a little more difficult, or makes things rub a little the wrong way for a while, that's fine. We're doing the right thing, and that's going to serve us well in the short term, and definitely in the long term best. It's never the wrong time to do the right thing. You guys have heard that before, I'm sure. And so let's not wrestle against God and His truth, for sure. All right, anything else?